Hey everybody, welcome back to Fighting Matters. I am Steve Kwan from BJJ Mental Models. I've got the GOAT on the line here. I've got Stephan Kesting from Grapple Arts. How's it going, buddy?
It's going okay. It's going okay. Although, we are doing this as a political podcast, and there's so much to talk about. May I go on a rant? I've got a rant that's brewing up inside me as I was driving around today. I was thinking about something. It was driving me insane.
Do we need to build up to the rant, or is it a standalone rant that we can just launch into?
It's a standalone rant. It's a standalone. It starts with astrophysics. So there's this thing called the Fermi paradox, which says basically, if our galaxy has hundreds of thousands of stars in them, and there are hundreds of thousands of galaxies, then where is everybody? Where are all the intelligent civilizations? Where are the radio messages? Where are the signs of civilization elsewhere? And there are many different answers. The dark forest hypothesis, or the hypothesis that simple life is easy to develop, but complex life requires a whole bunch of factors. But one of the answers to the Fermi paradox is that when life becomes sufficiently advanced, it wipes itself out, or it tends to wipe itself out. Either, nuclear war, or some biological agent gets released, or chemical warfare, or runaway climate change. That once you have life that's intelligent enough to really have a big impact, it has a big impact eventually. Some mistake gets made and it wipes itself out. So I'm looking now at Denmark and Germany and the UK and Estonia and Latvia sending troops to Greenland in response to Trump's posturing. And I'm thinking about how when Hitler invaded the Sudetenland, he got away with it, and he thought, oh, nobody's going to stop me. And when he took Czechoslovakia, he got away with it and said, oh, nobody's going to stop me. And they invaded Poland, it was World War III. And then I take a look at the timing of invading Venezuela, basically right around when their deadline, when the administration's deadline to release the Epstein files, the unredacted files in its entirety, expired. And this giant distraction of we're going to invade Venezuela and now we're going to invade Greenland came along. And wouldn't that be a shitty solution to the Fermi paradox, that the reason we don't see advanced civilizations is because pedophiles trying to cover up their tracks are willing to essentially risk and eventually start World War III, because anything is better than them actually seeing the justice they deserve. So how's that for a cheery thought?
I was actually thinking something similar the other day myself, because it is a wild time to be alive. And look, there are people out in the world, 8 billion people. There are people waking up from comas all the time, right? And there's probably someone who's been in a coma for 10 years who just woke up. And imagine trying to explain to them what they missed. Right. So you want to know why we're disbanding NATO and we're going to war with the United States? Okay, we can explain that. Are you a fan of The Apprentice? Because that's kind of where this whole starts. That's like where the butterfly's wings flapped and it set off a series of events that led to this happening. That's insane when you think about it. I don't even know what to say. I mean, you and I, it hasn't been that long since we got on a call to chat, and it feels like an entire lifetime of late breaking news has happened just in the last few weeks. I mean, I could list off the events, but probably everyone knows. I don't even know where to start. I mean, do we start with talking about this weird I don't even know if you can call it toppling in Venezuela? Do we talk about going to war with NATO over Greenland? I mean, God, we could talk about the Epstein files. That's always in the background. Do we talk about Renee Good? I don't even know where to start, right? Even by Trump administration standards, the first few weeks of 2026 have been absolutely insane. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the point, right? I think that if there's one thing that Trump is exceptionally good at, it is making himself the center of attention at all times and making sure that people are always talking about him. And it just really feels like, again, you brought this up, how much of this is just a giant distraction to prevent people from focusing on the Epstein files. I can't say that for sure, but it seems like a pretty plausible explanation. And even if that's not true, the amount of stuff that has happened in the past 17 days, I mean, impeachment isn't even the right word for what would have happened to any other president by now. I mean, this is just a level of criminality that is not just unthinkable for any U.S. president, but even by Trump's own standards, unthinkable. If you told me in 2018 that Donald Trump was going to get reelected president and he was going to do all of this, I'm not sure I would have even believed it then. But it is just constant new levels of depravity with this guy. And it really feels like a lot of this is just because he's got this petulant need to be the center of attention at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how awful you think he's going to get, he finds one way to get just a bit lower so that everyone will keep talking about him and he'll own the news cycles, whether it be basically shaking someone down for a Nobel Peace Prize that he didn't even win himself, or the latest news today is now he wants to tariff NATO countries because they won't let him seize Greenland. Where do we start talking about this stuff? And what can we even say other than just screaming into the void at this point?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly a couple of things are evident. Number one, this is basically a reality TV show, right? Every episode of a reality TV show ends on a cliffhanger because you need a reason to tune back in. And that is what brought Trump to the forefront. That's what made him not only a celebrity, but an expert. He's a businessman. Never mind that if he'd taken his dad's fortune and invested it in an index fund, that he would be richer than he was at the beginning of his presidency. Since then, there's been incalculable grift and Trump phones and Trump sneakers and Trump watches and Trump coin and people buying.
Did you hear about
fucking NFTs?
Did you hear about the Venezuela oil funds and how they
No,
basically?
What are the Venezuela oil funds?
Okay, I don't have this up in front of me, but after seizing Venezuela, well, not even really seizing it, after deposing Maduro, Trump has claimed that Venezuelan oil is now basically the property of America, and apparently they've been taking a bunch of funds for that they have acquired, and they're sending them into some sort of like offshore account. I'm not even sure exactly where, but I mean, think about that happening. Think about if it came out that Barack Obama overthrew, Egypt, and had basically plundered them for assets and had taken like $500 million of their money and put it into a private account that is like outside of the control of the rest of government. Unbelievable that this is happening. But
was that the money that he's going to administer and supposedly give some to Venezuela?
Yes.
And give?
Yes. And as Elizabeth Warren said, there is no precedent or justification for a president basically taking these kinds of funds and putting them into an account that they can only control. It is an unbelievable thing. But at this point, the corruption is so normalized that it's not even surprising. I mean, it's barely worth talking about, because if Trump did something that wasn't corrupt, that would be newsworthy. The fact that he's doing this stuff is just what we expect at this point. And what he has allowed us to normalize is really the scary thing.
Yeah. I was reading recently, I think it was an article in The Atlantic, about basically the head banker in Germany when Hitler came to power. And basically, Hitler wanted to borrow or create unlimited amounts of money to fund his war efforts.
And we didn't talk about Jerome Powell. Are we talking about the Fed as well?
That is where we're going.
Continue your thought then.
And eventually the guy was forced out, and they got a new guy in who basically said, I will do whatever I need to do to fund whatever the needs of the nation are. And, and then we're off to the races. Now we're off to World War II. So, yeah, the Jerome Powell thing is interesting as well, because it's kind of like, it's one of the last checks and balances. Like, in terms of effective checks and balances on this guy's power, what's left? The Supreme Court? Nope. Congress? Nope. The Senate? Nope. The media? Not really, other than a few comedians and maybe South Park. You've got, CBS basically reporting, basically you've got a media, not a conglomeration, an amalgamation and a centralization of media power, and now social media power as well. So what checks and balances are there left? Despite him being in an all-time popularity low, who is really in a position to stop this? And I don't know. I still have friends going, oh, just wait till the midterms. They're going to get slaughtered. What do you think? What's your prediction for the midterms? I've got a couple bets riding on it right now.
I think there's a few things. I think that people are way too optimistic about the midterms fixing things. Now, again, I am not like a political scholar here or anything, so take my opinion with a grain of salt, but you did ask for it. I think elections will happen. I, even in authoritarian countries, in like a modern competitive autocracy like Russia, they still
Russia has
have
elections.
elections. Yeah, they still have elections. So I think the elections will happen. We know that they are going to try to rat fuck this as bad as they can to tip the favor towards the Republicans. They've been doing that for decades now. But that said, the level of unpopularity here is so heavy that it's so high that I think that it might even be possible to overcome that. I mean, just taking a look at the elections that have happened recently, it is possible that even with maximum gerrymandering and fuckery, that the Democrats still sweep this. I would not be surprised. But my concern though is what then, right? Like, do we really think that if the Democrats take the House with a minority and the Senate stays in the hands of the Republicans, that anything is going to come out of it? What kind of checks and balances is that really going to do? I mean, yeah, you might be able to put impeachment on the floor and have it killed in the Senate, but that's it, right? I mean, I don't think that that is enough by far. And even if by some absolute roll of the dice, like the impossible happened, and the Democrats managed to do the unthinkable and take a majority in the House and the Senate, even if they were able to manage to squeak impeachment through and get that done, I'm not convinced that this government would actually respect it. I think it would come down to them basically saying, fuck you, make me. Right. And what then? Do we really think that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and these people are going to have the balls and the guts and the temerity to actually fix this if Trump goes that far into the direction of illegal behavior? I don't know. I think right now the only hope is the American people. That is the only chance of something like this. They have to. I can't remember who I was listening to, but someone had a great point about this, and they basically said that what has to happen now is all of these senators and Republicans and enablers behind Trump need to be more afraid of the people than they are of the president, because they've clearly demonstrated that they have no bounding morals. There is no ethical line that they will not cross in order to support their dear leader. So the only thing is they have to be more afraid of losing their power, of consequences from the people than they are of the president, because that's how fascism works, right? I mean, these people are fucking incompetent. This is easily the most incompetent administration in the history of America. It is unbelievable how evil and incompetent they are. But the thing about fascists is they usually are incompetent. Their power doesn't come from competency. Their power comes from fear of creating a culture where their victory and their power seems inevitable. But if you strip away the people who support Trump, he's just this angry, racist old man. That's all he is. He has no power. He has no competence, except for the fact that we all live in this collective delusion and we believe that he does. That's really all it would take, and then they could have this guy gone tomorrow. But at this point in time, everyone is rallying around him and enabling him. I think the only hope is with the American people at this point. Anyway, sorry, go on.
I think that used to be true in the way that things worked, but the bottom line is he's now got a couple of private militias. He has his own SS. He has a personal militia that's essentially loyal only to him. $100,000 a year, $50,000 sign-up bonus, a gun, a cool uniform, and you can do all the shit that you dreamed about when you were a Proud Boy, and now you can do it and get paid and essentially have immunity. The ICE is now getting more funding than the FBI. So let's just say that the election happens. There's so many ways that you can use a private. I mean, let's say your scenario happens. Let's say that 10 people flip. What happens to those people, right? They are going to get firebombed. They know that they're going to get doxxed. It doesn't matter if they're Republican. They're going to get doxxed. They're going to get firebombed. They're going to get shot. They're going to have the crazy 30% diehard MAGA people hunting them for the rest of their life. They're probably from a red state, so there's probably more than 30%. They're going to get investigated. ICE is going to come and arrest them for something. Oh, you had a Mexican guy cut your grass 5 years ago. Therefore, you're a domestic terrorist, right? But that's even assuming that it gets as far as the voices of sanity having majority. Like, yeah, the states run the elections. I get that. But the playbook has already been written, right? Guess what? There's massive election fraud, and we need to seize all the ballots from California. And we're going to send in the 82nd Airborne and ICE to seize all the ballots. And we're going to do the false elector scheme for 12 different states. And we're going to, every way that they tried to throw the election in 2020, they can now do it with the help of a giant paramilitary force, with anyone who showed any resistance. I don't know, the old school Republicans, the John Kerrys, say, the Cheneys, they're gone. They're gone because
John
they've been
Kerry a Democrat? I think you mean John McCain.
John McCain, sorry. John McCain, Liz Cheney, those people who showed some spine and showed some resistance, they're gone. So I don't see that, we ever get. They've already tried to overthrow an election, including with paramilitary force. They were just called the Proud Boys, and they were disorganized at that point. They've been organized now into ICE. I don't see what the answer is. I mean, maybe a massive economic collapse. Maybe if all these economic shenanigans come home to roost, or countries start dumping U.S. bonds and the value of the U.S. dollar goes to zero, or not to zero, but goes down to 10% of what it was, that could trigger enough discontent at home. Maybe, but I mean, to go with a German example, life was pretty tough in Germany for a long time before the general populace, and Hitler was never deposed. Yeah, there were assassination attempts that never worked. And in the end, it was he who ended up offing himself when another country was invading. But there was a lot of suffering and starvation in Germany for years on the home front during the war. And he had all the levers of power. Oh, you're bitching about your leader? Well, you're clearly a terrorist, and you're going to go for a free ride to the camps.
I am really worried about the direction that this is going to take because, like you said, it is quite clear that the Trump administration knows how unpopular they are, and so they are trying to seize as much power and control as they can before the law catches up to them, in the hopes that it'll be too late by the time people actually get around to rising up and doing something about this. I mean, short of a full economic gridlock or strike or collapse, I don't know what it's going to take here. The Fed situation is an interesting one because this might be something that tips a lot of people in a different direction, simply because, look, does Mark Zuckerberg and do Elon Musk really care if Donald Trump tramples on the rights of individual Americans? I'm going to guess probably, honestly, sadly, they don't. But when you start fucking with the dollar and inflation, you run the risk of basically turning the entire American economy into a joke. And even if these guys try to shuffle their assets around to the rest of the, to other countries and currencies, they run the risk of losing the one thing that they really care about here, which is their wealth, right? If Trump kills the economy. And starting to fuck with an independent Fed is one of the first signs of like a country turning into just an economic joke. That's the scary thing. I mean, I know that Americans have lived their entire lives from this position of power, and they think it's impossible that it could happen here, that it could happen to them. But they're not the first people who have lived through this and who have believed that. It would not be the first empire to fall in this manner. And if the dollar collapses, and there's a lot of reasons to believe it, that, I mean, just, hey, as a Canadian who does a lot of foreign exchange, right? I mean, it has been interesting to see the dollar just collapse in value and desirability just over the past year. If they start messing with the Fed, I mean, especially given that the BRICS countries are trying to put together like an alternative currency, this could be a big deal. Look, you and I are Canadian, right? Huge news in the last 24, 48 hours that Canada is really, putting aside a lot of old grievances with China and deepening our relationship with them. And I think a lot of Canadians probably don't feel great about that because for the Americans and others who don't know, Canada's had a strained relationship with China over the past 10 or so years. And beyond that, we don't want to get into bed with an authoritarian government that has meddled in our elections before. But all of the criticisms that we would normally level at China, we can now level those at the US as well, sometimes more so. I mean, China, for all of the bad that you can say about them, they have not threatened to invade Canada in any way, or to annex us, right? So at the end of the day, I don't know what we're expected to do up here. And I know that Americans feel like they're invincible and Canada and these other countries are small and insignificant. Look, if you add up the power of the NATO allies and the collective dollar value of those, it's on par with America. And then if you factor in that a lot of American foreign debt is held by NATO countries and other countries, if everyone just decides we don't want to deal with these people anymore and we start dropping that, then that is going to, I think, burst this imaginary bubble of superiority that a lot of people in America believe in right now. And I think they're in for a rude awakening if they don't do something fast.
It's a little bit outside my area of expertise, but I do wonder, let's say magically tomorrow, every country in the world dumped 90% of its American debt, right? They sell off all the bonds and they basically implode the value of the US dollar and they create massive runaway inflation in the States. How long does the US remain a viable military entity after that? I gotta imagine it's years, and a wounded elephant is still pretty dangerous. I wouldn't want to be locked in a room with a wounded elephant. Or essentially somebody who is a sociopathic narcissist to a level we've never seen would
I
be
thought it
willing
was
to start.
unthinkable. Not
Would
just
be
never seen. I thought it was unthinkable that a person like this could become president, right? I mean, I've never even met a person who is just so. I don't even know the word to describe him. I mean, Donald Trump is he's like
sociopathic
one of
narcissist is a good start.
yeah, but even by those standards, he's something else. I mean, shaking down someone for their Nobel Peace Prize, like
And probably giving nothing in return.
I
I'm going
know
to
it's
send him my Tiger Bomb 1980 or 1995 gold medal and see maybe I can save Canada. I'm going to unilaterally save Canada by sending him my uh, Tiger Bomb invitational jiu-jitsu. It was a super regional little jiu-jitsu tournament I competed in. One of the first I ever did. I still have the medal somewhere. I'll send that. I'll see if it does any good.
just tell him it's the Canada Peace Prize, and you'll be all. Oh, did you hear the new thing that just came out? He's trying to create this peace coalition with like Mark Carney and Tony Blair for some reason. And the thing he just announced today is he wants all of the people who are part of this coalition to pay him $1 billion because that's the price of peace. Apparently,
Sorry,
it's $1
what?
billion a
I
head.
heard about the coalition. I didn't hear about the shakedown.
Yeah, that's new. That is late breaking news. So I guess Canada is going to be expected to pay $1 billion for the privilege of being on his peace council.
I did have a conservative recently throw that into my face that, well, Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, is in China right now making deals. What's he doing there? Well, what are you going to do if you're in the position of, say, the Mexican president, the what is it? The president of Greenland? No, it's the Prime Minister of Greenland, I think, or the Prime Minister of Canada.
I'm not totally sure of their structure.
The leader of Greenland. How's that?
Yeah.
You're dealing with somebody who's absolutely insane and changing their demands and doesn't stick to deals after they make them anyway. You're going to smile and nod, and you're going to, meanwhile, be scampering for every corner trying to make every trade deal you can. I have major fucking reservations about Canada climbing into bed with China. But from a question of national survival, of course they're going to do that. I have major reservations about drill baby drill here in Canada for oil and gas. But from a question of national survival, I think we have to do that. It goes against everything that I used to think was the priority. I think global warming and runaway climate change is an existential threat for everybody. But realistically, what is Canada going to do? We're going to drill, baby drill, and sell China as much of our oil and gas as we possibly can.
Well, look, here's a question for you, right? if we really care about global warming, if we believe that climate change is the existential threat of our time, which up until about a year ago, I would have said is the case. Now I think there's a greater existential threat. But
Sure.
if you believe,
A more
yeah,
immediate existential threat.
if you believe that climate change is an existential threat that we must deal with, who is a better partner to fix that problem with right now? The United States or China? It's China, right? They are leading in EV, they're leading in green energy. They have actually done an amazing job of curbing and turning the dial back on a lot of the massive pollution problems they had. The United States is at war with fucking windmills. Like it is unbelievable. And it's crazy because the price of green energy has fallen through the floor. There are amazing things being done with green energy right now, even despite the fact that Trump is aggressively trying to kill it. In the US, it's still a massively growing and exciting area of development because it's finally gotten to the point where it's so cheap that, like, why not do it? There is a very real path now to solving climate change if we can get people on the same page. But what I think has become very clear is we just cannot rely on Americans to get on the same page about this. So as much as I hate to say it, I mean, one of the leaders on this is China, and I don't feel good about this kind of partnership with them. But I mean, again, they're not threatening to invade us, so that's something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess a lot of Americans, based on my Facebook comments, as an aside, have you noticed how Facebook has basically become a Twitter recently in terms of just being overrun by absolute right-wing trolls? Uh,
Yeah. So I can talk about this. So on I never really used the BJJ Mental Models Facebook page that much. There's a lot of followers there, but I found that we get way more engagement on other platforms like Instagram and Reddit. So that's mostly where I hang. But we do have a Facebook page. I just don't use it much. So the algorithm, I guess, there is presumably mostly tuned to what it would show a standard person that they think is interested in jiu-jitsu. I haven't done a lot of filtering. So every time I go on there, it's just like the most abominable right-wing shit. Like it's all just MMA, trans hate stuff. Jake Shields wants to challenge a trans person to a death match. Colby Covington is so thankful for ICE. It's like, why the fuck would anyone think I, of all people, would want to see this stuff? This really makes me feel bad for young boys and men right now because this is their default viewing experience when they go onto Facebook. This shit is just straight up propagandic at this point. I mean, there's been talk in some of the more refined countries about banning meta platforms. Canada, I think, recently was rumored to be interested in that, but shot it down. I disagree. I am all for it. If they were to tell me that we were going to take a hardline stance and ban X and Meta products from Canada, even though my business is super dependent on Meta advertising, I would support that decision in a heartbeat. These platforms are vile and dangerous.
it's not a principle until it costs you money. Now, that being said, let's just play a mental game. Canada bans X. Canada bans Twitter and Grok. Do you think that there would be massive retaliation from the U.S. administration? For sure. 100%.
What
In
could they
fact,
do? What could they do that they haven't already done short of an boots on the ground invasion?
1,000,000% tariffs, saber rattling, massively increasing the amount of funding that they give to separatist groups within Canada. I think the saber rattling, threatening, I mean, they've already played with saying that our borders should be changed, right? That Southern Ontario productivity belt. You can call it the Ruhrland, maybe. Uh,
Should we
yeah,
talk about these funding of the separatist groups? Because I'm guessing a lot of Americans don't know about that, and that's important.
yeah. Please do. I can speak. So, the Texas of Canada is a place called Alberta. It's a province. It's oil rich. It's reasonably rural, and culturally, it's
It's cowboy country.
cowboys and cattle raising, and you've got guys who work in oil and gas driving around in pickup trucks wearing cowboy hats and cowboy boots because country. And there's a strong or a very vocal separatist movement. We want to separate from Canada. And basically, it's not said directly, we want to join the United States. There's a lot of evidence that the ton of funding for this is coming from the States. So, so yeah, it's an attempt to disrupt Canadian unity, as you would do if you wanted your neighbors to be fighting amongst themselves. so you can do whatever you want.
Isn't this the same thing that America accused Russia of doing in the 2016 election, which is basically deliberately trying to meddle with a foreign election?
Well, the depends who you ask in the States, right? I mean, they the
Well, is
Republicans
it not a
categorically
foreign
denied.
power throwing money into an initiative to
Well,
try to
there's a
alter
ton
and
of evidence
manipulate
that
it?
Russia meddled in the 2016 elections,
Yeah,
but
but
it
America is doing the same thing to Canada right now.
yeah. And to be fair, they've meddled in tons of elections all over the world. They have. You know, South America, they've uh, they have done this for a long time. But this is a new one, like really actively encouraging an entire province of Canada to break away. That's a new one. I don't think the Americans were that involved during the Quebec. There's another province called Quebec. It's the French-speaking part of Canada that wanted to break away and has had various attempts to break away. I don't know how much funding the Americans were giving to those movements. I don't think very much. At least there was no evidence ever presented uh, to that end.
I think probably they see the Republicans, at least, and the people who support that movement see themselves as being more ideologically aligned with the Albertans, I would guess, than with Quebec. And frankly, considering who these people are, there's probably a degree of racism involved as well. So maybe that's why Alberta is so attractive to them. That and I mean, we don't need to get into Canadian politics, but the person currently running Alberta is just a total nuisance loser. And so maybe, I mean, she's always down at Mar-a-Lago, so maybe that's part of the appeal as well.
Yeah, she went down and did the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, and she says she's not an anti-vaxxer, but basically it's anti-vax policies. And she says she's not a separatist, but basically there's separatist policies. And she says it's not, she's not Maha, but there's basically Maha and MAGA
Yeah.
policies. Um,
Oh, speaking of which, don't know if you saw this. You're going to love this. Did you see that the other day, RFK Jr. did an interview with, I believe it was Stephen Miller's wife? And okay, first of all, why anyone cares what Stephen Miller's wife has to say, I don't know. Why she has a podcast that anyone would listen to, why you'd put her in the media, I have no idea. But he said something to the effect of like, a good mother doesn't listen to the experts when it comes to their children's health. Did you hear that? Fuck
I
that
had not
guy.
heard that. I had not
That's what he
heard
said.
that.
He said like, you know, a good mother would not, I can't, I'm not going to do an impression of his voice, although I think I can actually do it. But RFK Jr. said something to the effect of, you know, a good mother would not listen to what the experts say when it comes to their children's health. I guess the inclination being that her intuition is more valuable than, you know, decades and decades and decades and billions of dollars of research and evidence. I mean,
Her
that is,
intuition shaped by a decade of massive amounts of disinformation and misinformation, because you can shape people's intuition uh, very easily by. I mean, it's like the people who believed. My favorite example of culture shaping what you know to be true is if you take a look at the reports of people who were abducted by aliens in the 1950s. The aliens that abducted them all looked like Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? And then after the movie E.T. came out, all of a sudden when people got abducted by aliens and rectally probed by aliens, because that's really what aliens do after traveling across the untold depths of space, they really like probing human rectums. They all looked like E.T. because that was the big breakthrough movie. That basically, that was the alien movie when all these people were in high school, and now they're convinced that, or the studies showing that people have past life regressions, who they were in a past life is mostly related to the types of movies they've been watching recently. So yeah, a mother's intuition as to what to do with her child is shaped by the environment of information and disinformation that she's immersed in. It's interesting that Stephen Miller's wife was really one of the first salvos in this recent United States needs Greenland because we need it. Uh, when she posted that image of Greenland with us covered in the stars and stripes on her Twitter, I think it was. And so she's being used as an arm of the government. But here's the thing. Here's a lens to look at current politics. There's Trump saying and doing outrageous things. And can you believe what he said today? Can you believe what he said this morning? Can you believe what he did this afternoon? Can you believe that video of him flying a jet plane, dumping human shit all over protesters? Can you believe, whatever the most insane thing is recently, and we're all focused on Trump. Meanwhile, in the background, Stephen Miller is speedrunning the Heritage Foundation's plan for remaking the United States into a fascist theocracy along the lines of Project 2025. So while Trump is the clown jumping up and down and making weird facial signs and pretending to be a trans weightlifter and posting one more outrageous AI video than the last, Project 2025 clicks a little bit further ahead. Oh, we're going to limit access to contraception. Oh, we're going to clip the power of unions again. We're going to we're going to create a private militia that gets massive amounts of funding and access to military grade weapons to supposedly capture the illegal immigrants. Which then, I mean, ICE will get repurposed. The SA and the SS, they started out, so the SS started out as Hitler's personal bodyguard. And a few years later, they're running massive divisions of not the German Wehrmacht, but they were in Russia. There were SS divisions fighting along Wehrmacht divisions. That metastasized so quickly from a bodyguard to running the camps, controlling thought policing Germans, fighting Russians on massive scales with fanatical troops. I think there's a lens through which Stephen Miller is the real villain here.
Well, yeah, I think the big three are Stephen Miller, Russell Vogt, and J.D. Vance. I mean, Trump is basically just being used by those guys right now because of his cult-like influence over his followers. They're trying to do as much damage as they can and execute as much of their agenda as they can, presumably before he kicks the bucket, right? I mean, he's basically just there because of his ability to rally the MAGA base and also to act as a bit of a heat shield. But you're right. The real power, I think, behind this is probably those guys. And I just hope that one day there is like a Nuremberg style trial and these people are held accountable, because what's being done right now is just horrifying. And I hate to even have conversations like this because I know we're falling right into the playbook here, right? What they want is to create this massive noise storm so that we all have to react and spend our time talking about, can you believe this crazy thing they did? And I don't feel good about the fact that we're playing right into their hand here, but I think this also does need to be talked about, because in our community, especially the martial arts community, nobody is talking about this. And if one random jiu-jitsu or MMA fighter listens to this and it makes them aware of what's going on because it's outside of the regular bubble, then I think it's worthwhile, and I think we had to do it. But it still feels bad because I feel like we're just doing what they want. We're creating more noise and amplification for this horrific shit that they're doing. And from a strategy standpoint, I don't like that. But I am also cognizant of the fact that no one in our community is talking about that. And even when people do speak up, there's this massive pressure to keep politics out of the martial arts, bro. Someone's got to talk about this stuff, right? Like this is existential shit. When you and I and the rest were talking about doing this podcast, we wanted to talk specifically about things that impacted the martial arts community, because that's what we know about. I don't want to talk about American immigration policy or invading Venezuela, but it's getting to the point where these disastrous decisions are becoming so earth-shatteringly bad that they are the most important thing happening in the martial arts community right now. Like all of this tariff policy and NATO collapse stuff, this is going to have way more impact on the jiu-jitsu and MMA communities than anything happening at CJI or ADCC, right? Because this kind of stuff is what prevents like international travel. It prevents America from being able to send their athletes in and out of other countries. It prevents other people from wanting to deal with America, right? This is the most important series of events happening in our sport right now, even though it has nothing to do with the sport. And so it frustrates me that we have to talk about this stuff, but it's way more important than anything directly related to the martial arts.
Yeah, people might accuse me of Trump derangement syndrome or speaking hyperbolistically when I'm talking about World War III. But honestly, when you've got European troops sending trigger forces like to basically trigger a NATO defense to Greenland. One little error, one late night rage deployment, that it actually could trigger World War III. And even if it doesn't, it's going to be pretty tough to run your jiu-jitsu school when there's a, a depression that makes the Great Depression look like a bad afternoon, right? It's if this turns into a full-blown, no-holds-barred trade war, complete with dumping of U.S. bonds, which is the nuclear option before you actually go to war, there's not going to be anybody going to your jiu-jitsu school because bread is going to be $100 a loaf. It's going to look like pre-World War II Germany, after between World War I and World War II, when you'd show up with a shopping cart full of money to buy a loaf of bread, and if you went in the afternoon, you'd need 2 shopping carts of money. And even if the foreign powers don't dump the bonds, I mean, Trump has increased the size of the U.S. debt by 30% in 5 years of being in charge. He's increased the U.S. debt by 30% which is trillions of dollars. So yeah, Trump's a great businessman. Oh yeah, oh yeah. He's
doing the exact same thing with America that he did with his businesses, which is he's basically burning through tons and tons of money. Yeah, tons and tons of money in the hopes of pumping and dumping and creating a greater scam, almost like a Ponzi scheme, where then he can leapfrog onto that, right? It's the exact same thing he did with his businesses. All of his businesses failed, and he's running America like that. I mean, I am really concerned about the future of that country. Did you know that in the first year of Trump's second term, American foreclosure rates went up by over 20%? Like, fuck, this is bad news. I mean, I know that right now, if you look just at GDP in the stock market, it's easy to convince yourself that things are great, but that is not the reality on the ground. This AI bubble, a handful of companies, less than a dozen, are basically responsible for floating the entire American economy right now. And I don't see any good path that these AI companies get to the point where they can make enough money to justify their spend, because it's unbelievable how much they're spending. I mean, this is economically really, really, really scary stuff.
Yeah. I've had a number of conversations last couple of weeks with American friends whose healthcare premiums for their family have doubled and tripled. They've gone from spending $1,000 a month to $2,500 a month. So, yeah, if just in case, do you think that they're going to be spending money on jiu-jitsu classes now that they're spending they're spending 30 grand a year on health insurance? Do you think there's going to be much left over for jiu-jitsu classes for little Jimmy? I'm going to say no. So it'll be interesting to see what the bankruptcy rates are in the next 6 months. I mean, health-related issues were already the biggest driver of personal bankruptcy in the United States. I think we're going to see a tsunami of personal bankruptcies. I've never been so happy to be a Canadian in the socialist hellscape of socialized medicine, where I might have to wait a few hours for a non-life-saving medical procedure, but but having something, I don't know, a kidney transplant means that I'm not in generational debt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just to give Americans some perspective, I talk to people in the States all the time, and I just ask to, compare dollar to dollar, what do things cost down there? I mean, the healthcare numbers in America are insane, right? Even before this, people were paying over $1,000 a month a lot of the time, and that's going to double for many people or go up higher just for their healthcare. I pay zero. I know that an ambulance ride in the States is like 4 or 5 figures. It's not cheap. Last time I had to take an ambulance, it cost me $80, and I was flabbergasted that I even got charged. I assumed I was going to get it for free. I got in to see the best shoulder surgeon in the province. Cost me nothing, right? $0. My electricity bill I don't know about yours, my electricity bill every month is only like $50. During a season like winter, where I got to spend a lot to make, where it's because it's colder, maybe 60 or 70. I got friends in the States who are paying like $700, $800 a month in electricity. If this is a socialist hellscape that I live in, then I'm happy living in a socialist hellscape compared to the alternative.
You and I have a mutual friend, and I don't want to go into details, who survived cancer and is now paying 10 grand a month in health premiums. 10 grand a month. That's 120 grand a year. So, at, at that price, you might have survived, but man, you better have lucked out on your Bitcoin investments because that's $1 million over 8 years in healthcare insurance.
Well, Stefan, I'm cognizant of the fact that we're screaming into the void, and that's kind of what they want us to be doing, right? If we're on here talking on the internet, we're not doing something in the real world about it. Although I could argue that, at least having some degree of reach in a community that is generally not receptive to these kinds of messages, at least we are doing something I think is productive. But for people who actually are fed up about this, and I know this is really happening. I mean, I got a lot of friends in the States, many of whom are on the conservative side, who have kind of privately told me, like, I think this might be it. Like, I think I might have to be ready to fight my own government. And that's a crazy thing to think about. I think this has kind of escaped like the resistance libs containment. I mean, even the New York Times just put out an article the other day called "The Resistance Libs Were Right." And basically the tenant was, and I mean, the New York Times is center right. It is not some woke left wing progressive rag. Even they, in this opinion piece, basically said, like, yep, okay, you guys are right. He's a fascist. We concede this now. What can the average person do about this in the face of all of these terrible things that are happening? What is the most productive thing that a regular citizen can do to increase the odds of saving the American experiment?
Well, if you live in a red state or you have a red representative, blow up their email, blow up their voicemail, blow up their physical mail, and start putting pressure on them to do the right thing and not simply to roll over and to stand up politically against the orange rapist. I think that's number one. But that actually takes time. It's so much easier to post on social media than it is to write a physical letter saying, "Dear Senator XYZ, what the fuck are you doing?" That's one thing. I think,
Physical letter too, not email.
yeah,
Physical letter and phone calls. Phone calls especially make a big difference. I know everyone is loath to do that because we're all a bunch of, terminally online dorks now, but emails, phone calls, and in-person visits make a huge, huge difference when you're trying to influence a politician.
100%. It'll be really interesting to see where the Minneapolis, perhaps Minnesota general strike goes. I don't believe there's been a general strike in something like 80 years,
There needs to be.
but that is one way to get the message across. Of course, that might bring in the 82nd Airborne, but that's, I think, a risk worth taking. It's really interesting to watch uh, the beginnings of the alignment of veterans groups and groups like the Black Panthers, right? Where two groups you couldn't imagine being more different, beginning to work together, beginning to talk together, beginning to, exercise their right to open carry. Like, uh, I know that this was going on in the 60s. You had Black Panther groups, doing open carry, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of laws were passed to stop that.
Funny that,
Yeah.
huh? As
Yeah.
soon as the black people start exercising their Second Amendment rights, now suddenly we got to put laws in place to restrict that. What a strange coincidence.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll be targeted for random citizenship checks. But you start seeing some really interesting coalitions. I'm beginning to see some fractures from some formerly diehard far-right Trump supporters who are now beginning to have second thoughts. Maybe as it's coming closer to home, or maybe it's just so egregious. Have you seen any of that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it is funny because whenever you criticize Trump, you will always be called some woke libtard, blue-haired activist loser or something. But if you actually look at a lot of the people leading the fight right now, these are people who 15 years ago would have called themselves Republicans, right? I mean, a lot of the woke liberal rags like the Bulwark, these people were all conservatives. Adam Kinzinger, conservative, right? a lot of these people have moved out of that party now, and it's easy for MAGA to dismiss them as being left wing, but like these are not left wing people. These are people, these are conservatives with conscience, and they've already departed that party because they saw where this was going. I think there is, I think we need to get past this whole left versus right, Democrat versus Republican distinction, because I don't think it applies anymore. We don't have that anymore. Like the ways that we grouped ourselves politically just 10 years ago are no longer applicable. You are basically at this point in time pro-democracy or you're not. It's one or the other. You're pro-racism, pro-fascism, or you're not. And that means we got to roll our sleeves and buckle up and partner with people that normally we would argue with and consider to be an opposing force. But for the benefit of getting through the night here, we've got to be willing to talk to and work with those people. And that means we might have to build some weird, unlikely coalitions, right? Because look, I would love to go back to the days where we could argue about trans athletes in sports. I would love to go back to that simpler time, as fucked up as that sounds. That means that we're probably going to have to partner with some people that have some beliefs that we would generally consider to be pretty disagreeable. But for the purpose of saving our collective system that we all benefit from, we've got to deal with that priority first. And I think you bring up a great point of like veterans, Black Panthers partnering together, Kamala Harris, Dick Cheney partnering together. These are signs that the old distinctions are falling apart. And I think that, I think when we look at the American system, I mean, yes, obviously the Republicans are the root cause of this, but whatever comes of this, if we do survive this and come out the other side, we have to hold the Democrats just as accountable, because yes, it was the Republicans who did this, but the Democrats had the job of being the check and balance and holding them in, holding America strong, and they failed to do that disastrously. It could have just as easily been the Democrats who went down this road, and the Republicans would have then needed to hold him accountable. It turned out to be the other way around, but the check and balance there, the opposing party failed. And I think America's really got to reckon with that. That like, yes, we need to hold the Republicans accountable, but we also must hold the Democrats accountable for failing to do their job of being the check and balance and preventing this.
Well, really, what are they going to do nowadays, though? They have no political power. Like, perhaps you could make an argument that Biden should have put a whole bunch of pressure on Merrick Garland and or replaced Merrick Garland, or Merrick Garland ran out the clock and Trump was able to stack a Supreme Court and basically pardon himself without actually pardoning himself. But getting, Eileen Cannon managed to run out the clock, delay. Whoops. Look, the case went away because Trump got reelected. So arguably appointing a much more aggressive version of Merrick Garland would have been one thing that they could have done. What can they do now? I don't know. I don't know what, if I was a Republican congressman, I could make. It's like the old joke about British police before they were armed, the bobbies would patrol with their little nightsticks. Stop, or I'll say stop again. It's interesting. So how Rogan is kind of a weather vane in the fight sport community. And I blame Rogan, and I've been very, very, very vocal about blaming him for a massive sea of disinformation and bullshit and anti-science and alt-science spreading. And he's obviously, by pandering to Elon Musk and JD Vance and Trump and bringing them all onto his podcast and giving them a super easy ride. And then when you had somebody from the other side coming on, just arguing with those people, but then basically filleting the far-right Republican guys, cupping the balls and swallowing the gravy, he helped massively get Trump elected. RFK Jr., buying into all of RFK Jr. stuff. With that being said, you're beginning to see Joe Rogan turn. And in terms of unlikely coalitions, like, I think I have to be grateful that now he's drawing comparisons between ICE and the Gestapo. Yeah, he's still doing that.
That is a remarkable thing. That is actually a remarkable thing. I mean, specifically using that word, the G word, like that is a remarkable thing that he did. I have been also with like you very critical of Rogan. I think that many of the problems that we have now are directly caused by him and his movement and his fan base. But at the same time, I mean, I've never met the man, but the impression that I get is he's more ignorant than evil. You know, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, Russell Vought, I consider these to be fundamentally evil, irredeemable people. Joe Rogan is a useful idiot, right? He's like if you took some drunk guy at the bar, some dumbass who has a lot of opinions and not a lot of information, and you gave him $1 billion in the world's most popular podcast. You'd create Joe Rogan.
And an
I
incredible
think
ability to speak, because he does have the gift of the gab, and he has a stand-up comedian's ability to just run his mouth and say something that seems coherent, which is a gift.
yeah, that is true. But I think that you're right. Like we have to be open to a coalition with this guy. I mean, we talked about this on the podcast. If there is one thing that we can be very critical of progressives for, it is how quickly they will other and reject people who are not 100% ideologically aligned. And we don't have time for that now. Like if Rogan is willing to stand up to this regime, we have to be willing to accept him back in, right? People made mistakes. They made very bad mistakes. And maybe we don't completely forget that they did those, but we have to at least be able to forgive them enough to put those aside so we can work with these people. Because if we can't coexist with like the moderates and the center right people who are rejecting Trump, then we can't win here. We have to have strength in numbers. That's the only way that something like this works.
Yeah, my friend Daniele Bolelli, who runs the History on Fire podcast, which is amazing, has talked about the resistance to the fascists in World War II, right? They were the partisans fighting Mussolini. And some of them were hardcore communists, and some of them were hardcore royalists, and some of them were hard left, and some of them were hard right, but they were all fighting Mussolini and the fascists together. Uh, so, adversity does make for strange bedfellows.
I
So,
mean, people don't talk about it much, but I mean, for all of the hates that America has for communist governments, they partnered with the Russians in World War II,
hmm,
right? When Hitler attacked Russia, the Allies took Russia in as part of the coalition. What would have happened if they said, "No, fuck you, Russia"? Too late. We do not forgive you. I'm not sure the war would have gone in the same way, right? So sometimes you have to park one feud to deal with a more important feud. And I think we're very much in that moment right now. I think it's all hands on deck. Like this, I think I worry that people in jiu-jitsu don't quite understand this enough because they do like to kind of keep their head in the sand and just believe that like I'm just going to focus on the gym. Current events don't affect me. Like this is an existential moment for America. This is a moment in history. This is the kind of moment that they taught you about in history books, right? And like what happens now is going to be the stuff that kids in other countries and maybe hopefully your own country read about 100 years from now. So how are you going to handle yourself and conduct yourself? Are you going to go along with this or ignore it because it's inconvenient, or are you going to have the balls to speak up and do something about it?
I completely agree. It's a threat to American democracy, but beyond that, it's a threat to American and North American financial stability, because there's a very easy mechanism that other countries could invoke and just destroy the U.S. economy. It hasn't been invoked so far. And then we are literally, there's a strong, as I started out the beginning of this podcast by saying, just because Trump has managed to bomb, what's he bombed? Bombed Iran. And he's bombed like 7 different countries. And now he's managed to go into Venezuela and seize Maduro and install a, some version of a puppet government. And now he's threatening Greenland. Sure. Greenland could be nothing. Maybe takes it, or maybe it's fucking Poland in World War II. And then the word existential means existence, means potentially, like, imagine World War II if all the countries involved in World War II had had nuclear weapons. We wouldn't be getting to a 1945. It would have been over by 1940. It would have been over in, I don't, depends on the delivery systems, but if all the countries at the beginning of World War II had had ICBMs equipped with multiple reentry nuclear warheads, we would have been in the Stone Age by 1950. We'd be lucky to not be dead. but at the very least, a Stone Age. So existential means existence. And this might sound hyperbolistic, but that's really where I think there's at least a significant chance. We're playing Russian roulette, and one of those
Danish
chambers,
roulette, technically.
yeah, we're playing Danish roulette, where one of those chambers, one of those 6 chambers in your revolver is loaded with all the nuclear weapons in the world.
What would you want people to do right now, Stephan, to try to stand up to this? I mean, the most obvious thing, like you said, is real world physical action, calling your senator, your congressman, writing letters, in-person protests. All of this makes a big difference. Anything else that you think the average martial artist here should be thinking about?
I think that's mostly it. I mean, it'd be nice if we could see uh, a martial arts for democracy movement showing up uh, at protests. Be nice if we could get involved more with, if you're in the States, with the various ICE watch movements where you're, you know, making it harder for ICE to go door to door. Is
Those
there anything
people
I'm
are
missing?
amazing in Minnesota. The observers, like to do that, to follow those people, blow whistles, to boo them, to shame them. That makes a big. You're seeing this in Minnesota. It makes a big difference. That is an ultra powerful tool because I mean, if nothing else, it destroys the morale of these people. Right? You can see it happening to these ICE agents. They are getting it here, and they deserve to get it for what they've done. And it really shows how powerful observing is, being an observer in a protest situation. So huge shout out to those people who are ice watching and, reporting them, helping people know where they are, blowing the whistle. That matters a lot.
Is there anything else that you think that we as martial artists should be doing?
There's a few things that I would suggest. I mean, one thing that I think is really important is mocking these people, right? They are fools. The whole thing about fascism, fascism doesn't have truth on its side. It doesn't have competence on its side. What it has on its side is power. And I think that's part of the reason why fascists do stuff like this, right? A lot of these things that Trump is doing, they don't really make sense. They don't benefit America, but they're very much like a will to power thing, right? He's doing these things because by exercising power, he can show that he has it. And when we allow him to create this aura of invincible strength, that's what fascists need to survive. That's what fuels their engine. It's not competence. It's not even public support. It's not the truth. It's this belief in their invincibility and their power. And when we mock them and make them look foolish, that really weakens them because that's the one thing that they cannot stand. I mean, take a look at Kimmel, right? One man, how much damage he has done to the Trump regime just by relentlessly mocking them. If you take a look at a lot of the networks that are, the independent media networks that are rising up, like Midas Touch, they are relentless with taking chunks out of the administration, not just reporting, but also making clear what fools, what losers these people are. We need to really do this. Like those videos, those highlight montage reels of ICE agents slipping on the ice and falling on their asses. Chef's kiss, amazing, beautiful stuff. More like that. So I'd say open mockery of these people matters. Being willing to use whatever tiny ass platform you have to stand up to these people and expose them as the jokes they are, that matters a lot. I'd say the other thing, and I'm increasingly thinking this important, is if someone lies, if someone spews out a mistruth, you need to correct it and you need to do it right then. We cannot just be silent in the face of this disinformation. Look back at where Trump was when he first started entering the political scene in 2008, 2009. He'd say something ridiculous and he would just get excoriated for that and he would be a laughing stock. Look at him now. The problem is all of the fact checkers got tired of fact checking him, but he didn't get tired of the lies. So he'll just sit there now in a room full of reporters and say 100 ridiculous things that we all know are false, but everyone is just so burned out about fact checking this guy that they won't point out that this is an obvious lie. I mean, the other day he said George W. Bush invoked the Insurrection Act 28 times. No one stopped him. Like, sir, that's bullshit. That's absolutely provably false. If you want to know what an impact this can make, watch that clip of Jerome Powell fact-checking Trump in real time about his lies about this overspending on his budget. It's amazing to watch. And you can tell this really hurt Trump because look at how personal he took that against Jerome Powell. This is how you stand up to fascists. You expose their lies to their faces and you expose them for the fools that they are. You laugh at them and you mock them. Their power comes from the perception of power and strength, not in any basis in truth. So by making them look weak and by exposing the truth, we can weaken their movement. That's my thought.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think I'd like to add one more thing, and it might seem small, but I think it's to vote with your dollars and vote with your feet. If you're in
Yes.
the jiu-jitsu space and you're at a gym and you're the owner of the gym is busy, you know, vocally and financially support and social medially supporting a fascist regime, leave and tell them why you're leaving. Your friends may
That
follow you or
last
you'll
step
make
is
new
super
friends.
important. That last step, tell them, because otherwise they don't know that there are consequences to their actions.
If if there's a company that's making instructionals that you like watching, jiu-jitsu instructionals, but that same company is platforming people like Josh Saunders, who's an out-and-out neo-Nazi, Jake Shields, who's an out-and-out neo-Nazi, Gordon Ryan, who's basically neo-Nazi adjacent, cosplaying, being a brown shirt, marching around in Washington in a uniform on Inauguration Day. Stop supporting them. Like, vote with your dollars and maybe consider telling them why. Because, it's a small action, but you have to punish bad behavior. Like, since when do you get a child to change its behavior by giving it a cookie despite whatever the kid does? If the kid does something bad, you take something away. It's simple.
The failures that we're seeing right now, all of these problems that we're experiencing, similar to World War II, like all of this was preventable, and it wasn't prevented because people failed to hold the bad people accountable, right? Trump should have been held accountable in his first term. He should have been impeached. He wasn't. He should have been jailed after January 6th. He wasn't. And as you let people get away with things, it just provides more resistance because they've now normalized this behavior. So you can't, to impeach Trump now for colluding with a foreign government like we did in, his first administration, that would be laughable at this point because that's just regular behavior for him now. He's moved the Overton window so far, and that's why it is so important to cut off this bad behavior right at the gates. The same thing with World War II, right? There was a chance to stop Hitler. He was jailed. They failed to do it. In this case, we're seeing the exact
After a coup
same thing.
attempt.
Yes. The parallels are shocking.
All right, brother. I think I've had a pretty good rant here. I know we were skipping around various topics, but I think it was important that we have one of these episodes as well.
I agree, man.
I think we'll try and refocus it next time for something a little bit more actionable. But, thanks for putting up with our runaway anxiety, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. And yeah, I mean, if anyone has any ideas or suggestions, drop them in the comments. Let us know. I mean, we're just a bunch of angry jiu-jitsu dudes. So if anyone is more intelligent than us about how to take real action, I want to hear about it. I guess one other thing, if you are going to vote with your dollar, if the behavior was egregious enough, consider not just telling the business owner, consider posting publicly about it, right? I mean, part of the reason why ABC and Disney backed down so quickly over the Jimmy Kimmel thing is because they had so many cancellations to their digital services, something like 7 million collectively in a matter of days. That's unbelievable. And not just that, but many of these people posted publicly. If you want to really send a message, cancel something, take a screenshot of the cancellation email or whatever that you receive, blur out your personal info, post it publicly, and tag the people that you canceled from, and let them know why you did it. Right? That is a message. That's a double blow because not only are they losing the money, but now you are exposing that you've done this, and you're setting a precedent that other people can follow. So it is doubly harmful to these people if you do that publicly. So if the action is egregious enough, consider not just sending a DM to the person telling them why you canceled your service, but let everyone else know. So I guess that's my closing thought. But yeah, Stephan, thank you so much for this. And as always, to listeners, thank you so much. I mean, again, this episode is kind of just a random grab bag of current events. I don't know exactly how helpful it is, but I feel better getting this off my chest. So thank you to anyone who listened. Take care, all. See ya.